So if your Waymo runs over a bus full of nuns and orphans, who's responsible?
You're driving in this thing and nobody's in it. So if something goes wrong, who's to blame? It's the AI, it's the software.
What if the person inside gets hurt?
And there's no human being in there. Who's calling 911 for you?
Like an active shooter, and the Waymo is la 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 driving down the street.
Who's liable for that? Who do you sue?
Law firms and law schools are doing a terrible job of trying to train the next generation of lawyers.
Our skill sets need to be sharpened.
There's no guessing, right? The light was either red or green. For litigators like us, that's the dream. There's going to be a lot more of that litigation. All right, so if your Waymo runs over a bus full of nuns and orphans, who's responsible?
What an interesting question, and what an interesting scenario. That's probably we'll see happen in the next several years. But who is responsible? Because when you get into a Waymo, and I had a personal experience 2 weeks ago where for the first time I ordered one in Austin, it came and picked me up, and you're driving in this thing and nobody's in it. So if something goes wrong, who's to blame? And I think where we're heading towards is it's the AI, it's the software. And then the next question becomes, but how do you determine where the AI went wrong? Where did the software sort of go rogue? And how do we determine that?
Yeah, you're the second person in a week that has told me about a favorable experience with Waymo cars. Okay, one was in Austin, and now you were in where was it that you took it?
It was also in Austin, yes.
Austin.
And it was, I was pretty impressed because we were by the University of Texas, and it was a very busy area. And it came by where the bus stop comes, and it was able to sort of detect that it was a congested area. It picked us up, we got in, it asked us to put what music we wanted on. We didn't have to talk to anybody. It dropped us off at the hotel, and then it went on its merry way, and we saw it turn around. And in these particular cities where Waymos are and other self-driving cars are popular, it is wild to be on the road and you see just everywhere around you cars with nobody in it.
Is that right?
I was in LA a couple months ago. My brother lives in LA, and he loves Waymo. He takes Waymo everywhere because he's a misanthrope. He doesn't like other human beings, so he will sit in the backseat of his car doing whatever the hell it is he's doing, and he's so happy he doesn't have to talk to anybody. And it's a very cool technology, but. There was this article I saw a few weeks ago where a Waymo killed a neighborhood cat in San Francisco. Oh my gosh. Kit Kat.
Oh
Poor
my God.
Kit Kat.
Rip
okay?
Kit Kat.
May Kit Kat rest in peace. And people are losing their minds. Okay, and it is
San Francisco,
right? Right. So okay. There's we put the asterisk, the San Francisco asterisk there. But let's assume that this wasn't just a neighborhood stray. This was actually somebody's pet. Or God forbid a person, there's some real liability issues that come up here. Let me ask you a question. When you're in the Waymo, do you have any ability to control the vehicle at all?
That is a really good question. In my experience, and I ordered the Waymo through Uber. So there's a way in particular cities where Uber has this partnership that you can change your settings so that you can opt in for a Waymo. But I don't think so. You just put in your address. It sort of calculates the same way maybe Tesla calculates the best routes. Yeah. You get in, and there's no deterrence. So I don't even know the mechanism. And that was a good question. I thought about when I was in the car, like if something goes wrong, how do we self-correct what's going on right now?
Yeah. I mean, because it's hard to imagine a scenario where the passenger would be responsible under any set of circumstances, right? If something happens, but gosh, the liability for Waymo must be significant.
I think it's an easier call if the Waymo runs over a cat or runs over a human being, because at that point, the person that's sitting in the Waymo, they can't control it. And even, I guess even if they had some level of control, it wouldn't be enough to kind of override the system. Mm-hmm. I think the more interesting question, though, is what if the person inside gets hurt? Like, what if that Waymo had gotten into an accident and, God forbid, you got hurt or your husband got hurt? Who's responsible for that? What happens then?
Right. That is such a good question. and something I'm wondering if these companies are thinking about in the event of an emergency and there's no human being in there. Who's calling 911 for you? Is that built in? Is that something, you know, these apps are thinking about in advance, especially as we're talking about this, and every other day you hear some sort of crazy story about these self-driving cars, and the possibilities are endless. I think it was last week in San Francisco where these two Waymos, they couldn't figure out how to get out of a parking spot. I don't think that the coding had sort of dealt with that situation yet, where they were both backing out at the same time. And it's a funny scenario because they're both, you know, dabbling in and out, and everyone's sort of just watching. And I think what ended up happening was that a physical human being had to come and back the cars out and sort of reset it. So that's a really, really good question. What are all these possibilities that these apps are thinking about? Because as we have all been driving for so many years, the possibilities are just endless of what can occur.
I bet you, and I haven't looked at the terms and conditions of the Waymo terms of use, but I bet you that there is a huge liability waiver. In fact, as you guys are talking, I'm going to look them up because I want to be sure. I bet you it says, when you're getting in this car, you're assuming the risk. You know that there is no driver, that this is a computerized new technology.
Yeah.
I bet you there's a huge waiver. So unless the car does something that's just crazy, like blows up, I bet you you're waiving it. I bet you're waiving it, and I bet you there's some sort of arbitration provision.
I would bet a lot of money that there's an arbitration clause for these Waymo things. Is there like a kill switch, right? If you're in this thing and you just want to get out, right? So let's say your Waymo's trying to back out of a parking spot. It can't figure it out. You're trapped in this car. Is there a way to just like press the red button and get the hell out of that car? I assume there is. There has to be.
You would hope.
Yeah.
You would hope.
Yeah, there has to be. We are moving into this world of robot control that Jose and I have talked about on this podcast before. That's really genuinely freaking me out. I heard the story recently of where there was some kind of like a police event where there's like an active shooter and the Waymo is, la 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 la, driving down the street. Any human that sees that is getting the hell out of there as quickly as possible. But the Waymo,
it's kind of endearing how wholesome they are, right?
Yeah,
It's okay.
It's cute. It's cute. It's cute. And then as bullets are going through the windows,
What happens then,
Right.
Yeah.
If you're in the Waymo at that time, because it did not update to go around that route, and then all of a sudden you have this traumatic experience of something you're involved in. Going back to the first question we asked, who's liable for that? Who do you sue? What are your rights in that sort of situation?
It's interesting to think about what this will do to the very significant sort of car accident legal, profession, right?
Yeah.
The thousands of lawyers that put up all these billboards in every city saying, were you in an accident? Because it feels like in the next few years, I don't know, do you think we probably won't have a lot of Uber drivers, right? We probably won't have a lot of people driving around. It feels like we're moving into Waymo land.
Well, here's the interesting thing for me, right? In a combination of Waymo and a combination of Uber. What if you own a Tesla, right? Tesla has an auto driving or autopilot feature. And what if you turn that on and you say, I'm going to allow my Tesla to be used as an Uber, and I'm going to allow that system to just drive people around. I mean, what happens then? Somebody gets hurt, not just the passenger, but somebody outside. Who's responsible for that, Ashley?
Right.
That's even more complicated.
Even more complicated because it goes from being your personal vehicle, maybe at 10 a.m. in the morning it was your personal vehicle, you were driving it, and then by noon it's a part of this Tesla robotaxi fleet, and now it's part of the Tesla service operating as a robotaxi Uber. And so, the lines are so blurred. Whose fault, who bears responsibility when it's your car, but operating in this new world and something goes wrong and you have no control over what that car is doing at that moment.
Yes, so as plaintiffs' trial lawyers, we're always looking for the deepest pocket. So under that scenario, I'm going to sue the car owner because he or she has insurance, right?
Yep.
We're going to access that insurance. We're going to sue Tesla because the autopilot system malfunctioned somehow. We're going to find everybody to sue, right?
Right.
Even Uber at that point, because you shouldn't have allowed that car to be used in the way that it was.
I would be very uncomfortable, like just putting my car into some kind of an auto fleet that it feels like the exposure.
Yeah, but you're an attorney and you're used to like contemplating risk.
Yeah,
that's what we do. We analyze it every single day. But the public at large, you think they're that discerning if they're not lawyers and they're not particularly scared? And it's a service, right? If Uber comes out and says, you can put your Tesla as part of this driver's or carpool that's going to use autopilot, I mean, that's almost like an invitation to do it.
Right,
That's, you
right.
have approval to do it.
Yeah.
I look at those cars. Listen, Austin and San Francisco, they have the infrastructure, I think, much more developed to be able to handle self-driving cars. I look at those Waymos driving around the streets of Miami, and I would be terrified to get into them.
Yeah.
I mean, the Miami drivers are lousy drivers. We are. I'm including us.
Yeah.
We're lousy
Well,
drivers.
I'm a very good driver. Speak for
So
yourself.
you say. Of course. Have you been in a Waymo in Miami?
I have not been in a Waymo in Miami, but this morning I saw one just, making laps around the Wynwood area. And I completely agree with you that it is so problematic. If you are a resident of Miami, or if you've driven in Miami, you understand the chaos of being safe in your own car and how many decisions you have to make, even in your 10-minute commute, just not to die. And so how is a self-driving car going to be prepared for all the crazy scenarios that Miami driving can present?
This delves into this idea of just trusting technology. Well, I had a self-driving Tesla, and I never used the self-driving feature because for the reasons you just said. I live in Miami. I-95 is a death trap. I just don't trust anybody, any of the other drivers, right? It's a psychotic place to drive. So I never trusted the self-driving technology. Now, one day we may look back on this podcast in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. It's going to happen. It's going to happen faster than you think.
I think so.
And we're going to say to ourselves, God, that was like such an old school mentality. Of course this technology works. Of course it's fantastic, right? I mean, and I would suspect that there's a bunch of science that suggests that Waymos are probably safer than Uber drivers. Right?
Yes.
But all of us right now are more comfortable getting into an Uber than getting into a Waymo.
But here's the difference, right? There is this kind of social contract, to use a term that you use often, where if you're on the road, there are certain rules that we have to follow, and you trust that other person is going to, all other persons on the road are going to do the same. If every car on the road was a Waymo, then I wouldn't have a problem. The problem comes with human error. So I'm in that Waymo, and some other person is driving like a lunatic, right? And that Waymo is just not responding to that driver because they're not programmed to.
But core to that point is your assumption that you contain a higher degree of decision making and a more refined ability to make decisions in crises than a Waymo. That's your assumption underlying that, right? But I would suspect that Elon Musk, for example, would disagree with you. Right. And I think and I bet the founders of Waymo would also say that everybody thinks they're, superhuman when it comes to decision making on the road. But the reality is that Waymos are better than you are in moments of crisis at making decisions.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about old stick shift cars. When I was a kid, there were a lot more stick shift cars on the road than there are now. Now you have to strain to find a stick shift car on the road, right? But the whole notion of the purists that were driving that stick shift was, I can do it better. I can make the gear shifts faster and better and more efficiently than the system, the computer that's controlling these shifts automatically. And now look where we are.
There's history is littered with the corpses of old technologies like that, where people would say, okay, this is something that the old school way is better. I mean, we can talk about AI all day in the law, right? And pieces of paper, and you have to use the books, right? You got to use the books to do legal research, right? And then Westlaw comes out, and then and now it's like, okay, well now I'm just going to go into ChatGPT. So it's technology.
Fast forward 5 years, where do you see it in terms of self-driving cars?
So one, I think children being born in 2025 and on probably will never learn to drive a car, right? If we're seeing it at this pace right now, and it's just in, the early iterations, and they're expanding in cities, and just this morning we saw one here in Miami. I don't think there's a world in which children are going to be driving.
Driving will just be an obsolete skill.
And what we're talking about right now, they won't even understand. But
it'd be like using a rotary telephone.
Right, exactly.
It's like, what's the point?
That's what came to mind.
But I think the next step is they're going to conquer sort of this city-like driving, and then what we're seeing, what they're trying to do right now with Tesla specifically, is semi-trucks, which is even scarier, because if a self-driving semi-truck malfunctions and hits you, again, who's at fault? What does that mean for your rights in that sort of situation? And how do we protect people who are not in self-driving cars from something like that, with a car that's, at a much larger magnitude than just, the little Waymo driving around Miami?
Are those already on the road, the semi-trucks? Because I read a lot about that stuff. Electric trucks, semi-trucks, but I don't know if the
I don't believe they're fully on the road yet. I think they're still in the test phase. And I think while we're talking about so many problems society faces, there is a huge, commercial driving truck shortage. So it fills the need. But going back to what we've said before, if these self-driving vehicles can't figure out how to get out of a parking spot or how to avoid an active shooting zone, imagine what could happen when you're, operating a semi-truck going 80 miles on the interstate, and
Right.
all of a sudden there's a 5-car, pile up, and will it be able to make a decision that fast to go off the road? Will it see the other cars there? How do you protect yourself from something like that?
But the inverse of that, right, is that every day we see on the news, right, some horrible car accident involving a semi-truck, right, on Alligator Alley or whatever,
Yeah.
and, people getting killed, et cetera. These are human-driven trucks. The trucking industry, notoriously, these drivers are driving extremely long distances for extremely long periods of time.
Yeah.
There's fatigue, there's human error, all that stuff comes in.
Of course.
Is it actually more dangerous or less dangerous for that than it is for self-driving trucks? Probably not, right? I think that there's just this discomfort with the technology and this other variable, which we think that it's like, well, I know for sure that if I have an alert driver driving a semi-truck and they see ahead sirens and smoke and whatever, they're going to know how to react appropriately. There's a 100% chance that that's going to happen. People aren't there yet with self-driving.
I think there's a spectrum of adoption and tolerance for new technology, right?
Yes.
So if you have a cell phone, a mobile phone, when the first iPhone came out, that was easily adopted because it's not going to kill you, right? The worst that could happen is it drops a call, right?
Yeah.
Or it overheats and it breaks, or that's it. When you're talking about driverless cars or semi-trucks, that is a life, threatening thing.
Right.
I mean, if it goes off the rails, it
Catastrophic,
literally goes off the rails, you're going to die. So I think that's why you're seeing some sort of hesitation, because the risks are higher. But to your point about this new generation kind of just accepting it blindly, I think that's absolutely true, right? I mean, like you said, the kids that are born this year or next year or within the next 5 years, they're not going to know any better. When I was 15, I couldn't wait to turn 16, because in Florida, when you turn 16, you get your driver's license. And the day that I got my driver's license, I took off. It was like this kind of liberating thing. Right. My older son is 15. Some of his friends have turned 16, and they're in no rush to get their licenses because they have access to things like Uber.
Yep.
Right?
How
That's
interesting.
adopting a technology. Now, that's not driverless, but that's just the reality of the world.
Right.
I mean, people are moving towards this new technology. And I agree with you that in the not so distant future, and the not so distant being 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a lot more of that, especially when people come back and report the favorable experience that they had. Right? I mean, this was incredible.
Absolutely.
Your brother loves it, and he's telling everybody, that he talks to about it, and so will you. We're having this whole conversation about it.
Absolutely.
Right. What about commercial airlines? Right. So now let's kind of take this to the next logical step. It'll drive down the price of flights for sure. Right. Yeah. Right now, I'd imagine that a good chunk, and I don't know a lot about flying, but I'd imagine that a good chunk of flying is automated. I kind of imagine it's akin to sort of a Tesla self-driving, where you're at the steering wheel, you have the ability to adapt and change, but for the most part, it's kind of on auto, right? How long before we get self-driving airplanes?
I got to tell you, I have less of a problem adopting that notion than the notion of driverless cars.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I think,
so
first of all, in terms of airplanes, I know a pilot, and he says that plane, the computer could do everything on that plane. Under federal regulations, the pilot has to take off and land for safety reasons. He says, but there's no way that plane would mess it up. It would do the same thing. And once they're up at a certain altitude, that plane is flying itself, every single plane.
Right.
So for me, it's just a kind of uniformity of adoption.
Right.
As long as it's being used by every airline and every single plane everywhere in the world, or at least everywhere I'm going, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I do have a problem with, some pilots, and I have significant concern with the technology not being adopted wholesale and there being human error. I mean, to your point, you're right. I mean, and maybe the computer is better able to address those things. There's this tension and this fear.
Yeah, and the technology is changing faster than our lizard brains are capable of sort of adopting, right? It just is, right? Right now, yes, this new generation, to your point, is going to be very comfortable with driverless cars.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. Now driverless planes, right? I suspect that your kids are probably going to be a lot more comfortable with that concept than we would be.
Right.
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 So, I mean, who knows?
It's in the works. And I saw, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, which I would sign up for this, right now, where they're trying to make self-driving. I don't know if it's a hybrid between, I guess, a helicopter and a small plane.
Oh, I saw that.
For commutes. So I could get from Fort Lauderdale to Miami in 10 minutes.
Yep.
It's completely self-driving, and they're hoping to make this into a service for people who commute, and all of a sudden, where you're losing 3 hours of your day, you can take these, whatever we want to call them, and it'll only take 10 minutes there, 10 minutes back. And so that's out there, it's happening. I think we keep going back to the same question though, because if you think about, Sully, like what would that plane do if he wasn't there to land the plane? Are these self-driving planes, even though for the most part they're very automated, there is this 1% chance that something so out of the ordinary can happen? And are these AI generated self-operating devices equipped to save a plane full of people? And do we take that risk when we see this technology being unveiled and sign up to be a part of it?
Well, the legal landscape is going to change very fast in all of these, for all of this stuff.
It's funny because law firms and lawyers, and particularly bigger law firms and lawyers, are always trying to catch up to the latest trend. When it was, marijuana was going to be legalized, they had a whole marijuana department. When it was, whatever it is, we're always trying to catch up. And some of these firms, particularly larger firms, are already gearing up. They're creating departments for, automated and AI and those kinds of things.
Right.
I think the law is always trying to catch up, but never quite getting it right.
Never quite
We're not
getting
there.
it.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
Are you seeing big firms though? Because I think when we're talking about how it changes the legal landscape and how do we prepare for these changes that are coming faster than we think, I think we have to start getting our skill sets need to be sharpened around reading data, understanding black boxes. If you find yourself representing somebody who's been affected or injured by some sort of self-driving vehicle, are we ready and can we work with experts to diagnose what went wrong with that vehicle or these commuting planes? Do we have the skill set for that? Are you seeing big firms who are investing in that and making sure the first year associates are getting better at software reading, not just coding? Because I remember when I was in law school, there was this, everybody was saying that associates are going to be eradicated and we all need to learn how to code. And here we are in 2025, and guess who doesn't have a job anymore, right? Coders.
Right.
AI has replaced that. So that, seemed to be fake news, but I do think younger lawyers need to start being comfortable with developing skill sets to analyze data like that, break it down, bring it to, the partner you're working with and be able to explain to them, this is our theory of liability, this is where it went wrong, and here's who I think we could sue, here who is operating this particular software program.
Yeah, look, I think that law firms and law schools are doing a terrible job of trying to train the next generation of lawyers for what's coming. And I speak about that all the time.
I agree.
There are skills that, and we can debate this, and I know that we have different views on this on some points, but I almost rather hire a young, good attorney, good fundamentals, but that is better skilled at entering prompts in a chatbot than they are at researching and writing the old traditional way, because those are skill sets that are going to translate. I mean, they're needed now, but they're going to translate into the future. So I don't think law schools are doing that at all. I don't think they're preparing them. Just the other day, I did see a post by the University of Miami where they're actually having a class on entering prompts for legal writing. That's what they should be doing. That's what they should be doing, because that's real world preparation as opposed to this academic thing where we're going to kind of research and write the old fashioned way. So to your point, I don't think they're doing that. The cool thing about, just you kind of touched upon like the forensic tracing that's required when you're litigating one of those cases. The cool thing about that, whether you're on the plaintiff side or on the defense side, is that all of these computer and automated services, they leave a trail.
Yes.
I mean, you know what's going on. It's almost like a black box. For years in airline cases, whenever there was a plane that went down and there was this catastrophic loss, all of those guys, the first thing they requested, all of those attorneys were requesting was, give me the black box information.
Yep.
Because that, you could hear everything that was happening, you knew how the speed of the plane, and you could diagnose exactly what was wrong with the plane. And I think the litigation landscape is going to be very, very interesting because it's going to become easier in a way. If you have all of that data and you have a system for being able to analyze it, then there's no guessing, right? The light was either red or green when you went through it.
And there's video of all of it.
That's it.
There's video of all of it.
So that is the next generation. Those are the things that we need to be training on. But I do think that it presents an incredible opportunity for learning, for growth, and for litigating. I mean, for litigators like us, that's the dream. I have a record, you know?
Right.
I read about a case the other day where there was an accident and the plaintiff's side requested information. It was a lady that was driving. She hit somebody, and unfortunately that person passed away. The plaintiff's attorney asked for information from the phone, metadata from the phone, and they were able to tell that at the time of the accident, that person was texting. It's all being recorded.
Yep.
Everything. There's a record of everything.
It's
like the
incredible,
DNA,
yeah.
right? So I do think that in terms of litigation, in terms of lawsuits, in terms of the law keeping up, when it comes to this automated, whether it's planes, semi-trucks, cars, there's going to be a lot more of that litigation, but it's going to resolve a lot faster because there aren't going to be many facts that are disputed surrounding it. I don't know. I just think that's the way to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, Ashley Robinson, thank you so much for being here on our podcast, talking about these important issues. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley.
So happy to be here, and you just got me major points with my husband.
Right.